Welcome, everybody. It's such a pleasure to have you here. I'm Josh Burkholz. I'm the CEO of BWF. And this is the second of our Client Partner Series webinars. And it's a really unique situation that we're all in, and we're so excited to have a chance to join with you. And I do mean that excitement. Any opportunity for connection really lifts our spirits. We've had such a volume of inquiries from you, our client partners, on how to navigate this uncertain time. And each day it seems like there's new restrictions with all of everything that's going on. But it doesn't mean your mission is any less important. In fact, it's more critical. And as we talked about with donor communications yesterday, how do we maintain that sense of urgency, maintain the donor behaviors and the donor patterns, while also listening and really having buoyancy with where the donors are and what they're going through. Today, we're going to be talking about how we navigate this new normal by how we develop remote capabilities with our gift officers. So we'll be talking about remote donor engagement during physical distancing. A few housekeeping items. If you have any technical difficulties, you'll see on the screen right now, there's bwf@bwf.com. Should be easy to remember, bwf@bwf.com. If you have questions on the connectivity or having troubles, please contact there. If you haven't even connected to see that, know that it's also in your email. So hopefully those that are not logged in will find that quickly. We're also going to monitor the Q&A section. If you have questions throughout, we're going to try to get to a couple of them. Maybe we'll get to a few of them based on time, but know that we will respond to all of you. Whether that is, we'll email you back with the answers. If there's a large volume, perhaps we'll have some sort of a panel discussion, but we promise we will get back to you with answers to your questions. And if there's additional commentary that you'd like to make in the Twitter universe, we do have the hashtag BWF webinar set up because perhaps you don't want to use the Q&A box, but you just want to talk generally, feel free to use that. Now, let's move on to the next slide. We're also going to have several other webinars coming up. We've got a resource page at BWF, bwf.com/current resources. And many of the topics that you have been giving to us, we've put into webinar series, and we'll continue to add more. The ones coming up here, you can see the March 25th on positioning your information strategy team during mandatory remote work. A lot of our focus has been on the fundraisers, but sometimes it's really tough to manage a fundraising operation. The development office, remote management of that. You can see some other topics there. We hope that you find those interesting and helpful. And if something else would be more interesting, please don't hesitate to contact us. Well, let's get started. I want to introduce the presenters today. First of all, I'm really pleased to announce that Justin Ware will be our first speaker. He's the Senior VP of BWF Digital Marketing and founder of Groundwork Digital. His work spanned nonprofits, higher education, and media. He's a fundraising and content marketing expert, as well as a thought leader in digital donor and engagement industry. Justin has spoken many, many times. I've had the pleasure of co-speaking with him a few times, and he's led consulting engagements for universities and nonprofits really throughout the world. And I'm also equally excited to announce Chris Clark, who's joining us as a presenter. He's a Senior Vice President of Philanthropic Council at BWF, where he works with the leading independent schools, liberal arts colleges, research universities, health systems, and social services organizations. His emphasis is on campaign readiness, annual giving, alumni relations, major gifts, and developing extensive volunteer programs. He's certainly a recognized leader. I've known from years from his contributions, including having chaired and presented at staff conferences, as well as at case conferences. Now, without further ado, you came to hear Justin and Chris. I'm going to hand it over to you, Justin. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.
So yeah, thank you, everybody. Actually, I'm gonna hop in here first and just start us off a little bit. So just to reiterate what Josh was saying, you know, this is a time that is this is a moment where we really need to share and come together. And with so many unknowns, it's so important to really think about all that your organizations, what they've done, what they're doing today, and what they'll continue to do tomorrow. So as we think about this, you know, I think one of the things that's really important is to remember our internal resources, right? So that we need to think about if there's a there's an article, a brochure, a video, anything that has been part of your organization to this point, to consider repurposing it and using it for a different audience. But really to the point here, people are social creatures, and we need to be engaged. And right now, that means with physical distancing, we've got to think about digital engagement. We've got to think about phone. We've got to think about video, all of our options there. So I like to think about it in terms of, the community is really important, and we need to continue to help people have a sense of community in our work and our donor engagement. I was working in higher education in around 9/11, and we had scheduled events that were around the country, including New York City, and we were considering canceling them or at least substantially delaying them. And as we reached out to people, one of the things that we heard was that people really wanted to get together. They wanted to have that sense of community, and they wanted to be part of the solution. And so, I think that really it's so fitting today as we think about this, that we need to be connecting, and we need to be figuring out how we're going to be keeping these relationships together and happening. And so maybe as the last piece here, so many of us in our jobs, we've been development officers or major gifts officers, frontline fundraisers. We've got a lot of different titles that we've had and we've used. But one of the things that I think that we don't use as much, and we probably need to remember, is relationship officer or relationship manager. And that's really what we are. And I think today that should come through, especially in the work that we're doing. Is we need to be the key to keeping this relationship going now more than ever.
All right, so yeah, 100%. And I think that's fortunately what we've been seeing from a lot of our client partners is exactly that, continuing to do the work, continuing to engage donors, continue to have conversations, in a lot of cases around funds that maybe directly impact the coronavirus or about how the coronavirus impacts their mission. I think a lot of donors care quite a bit about that, care to hear about that. So what's important then is that we figure out how to deliver that message, because we can't have coffee, we can't have dinner, we can't have galas, we can't have all of those in-person events that are so important to the work that we do. Fortunately though, there are, thanks to technology, some things that we can do. What's interesting is, this is almost like Chris mentioned, the moment that, I wouldn't say the moment we've been preparing for. That's absurd. No one's been preparing for a moment like this. It's scary, it's sad, it's confusing. We all know that. We all go through that. But then I think we also recognize that we're actually positioned to be able to do a lot of this work in a way that we never would have been even 5 years ago, let alone 20 or 30 years ago. And one of the ways in which we can be hopeful about not just the distant future, but the present, is we know how to engage donors through entirely digital tactics, raising 6- and 7-figure gifts from people we've never actually sat face-to-face with before. That's all happened as recent as a month or two ago. It's been happening for several years before, because a lot of organizations have started to do this digital development officer work, remote engagement work, using things like virtual teleconferencing, video conferencing, webinars like we have right now, a strong digital presence on social media, fantastic video. So, some of those organizations, and we're seeing that from the organizations that have actually got out ahead of this and have a digital development officer, or in higher education, student gift officers, or what have you, really being able to keep things moving in a more seamless fashion. Others have been in the wait and see mode for obvious reasons. It's a shift in strategy. There's resources required. You run the risk of doing something differently and not having the same results. All entirely valid reasons for why some organizations might have been a little bit slower to adopt this digital gift officer approach. But wait and see is over. It's come to an abrupt stop. Right now, all we have is remote digital donor engagement. And good news is, again, we have a lot of client partners out there. We have firms like ourselves and others that have been active in actually building these programs, engaging donors through digital remote means. So what I want to do now is talk about some of the tactics that really are the first place to start. Of course, there's a lot more that goes into this. We can have whole conversations around metrics and building a program like this for the long haul. But today, I want to at least give you some steps and tactics that any development officer can see and then go do as soon as this meeting is over. Uh, First things first, everything starts with video. Whether we're in the, in this coronavirus situation that we're in right now, or after we get past it and we were in the situation before, video is a very, very powerful tool, very, very powerful channel, very, very powerful medium for connecting with donors. We'll see some stats on that in just a second, but it's really interesting looking at some of the case presentations I've been seeing lately about how the psychology of video is so much different than any other form of communication outside of actually placing a person on the scene of the mission being fulfilled at that point in time. Much better than written, much better than photography, much better than any kind of, phone call, email, direct mail, video can actually take a person and transport them to the time and the place that you're trying to deliver the message. They can actually feel as if they're there, be more empathetic, be more part of what they're experiencing by many factors of X more intensely than they do through any other channel or medium. So one of the things we want to do is right away start creating more video. We're not just talking about the teleconferencing and the video conferencing. We'll get to that in a second, but actually just good old-fashioned video content. What do you have out there that already exists? It's possible you have a video team or a marketing team if you're a larger organization, or even a smaller organization, perhaps some sort of a library on YouTube. Is there content out there that performed really well when you first released it, or maybe you never got around to releasing it? What do you have in your tool belt that you can use right now to engage donors? Surfacing that is what we want to be thinking about. At a minimum, even if you are an organization that really, A, doesn't have a direct impact on coronavirus treatment, recovery, relief, or B, even if you're an organization that isn't really directly impacted by this. I know almost everyone everywhere is. But if you don't quite have that obvious, storyline, think about stewardship. Think about impact of giving. Think about simply just being present, talking about, this is what we do. We know you support us. You know why you support us. We're going to be here when this ends. So stick with us. We're here for any questions. If there's anything we can do to help, let us know. Delivering that kind of message on video, via video, is very important. Of course, there are those who actually have coronavirus-related funds, those in the healthcare industry, education, student assistance funds, things like that. There are a number of those taking place. And when that's the case, well, then we want to be elevating those funds. We are working with client partners right now that are having phenomenal online giving success. I mean, one client remarked yesterday, we rarely get more than 500 opens on an email. We got more than 500 gifts on just one email yesterday because of a coronavirus-related crowdfunding project. So, there is a lot of that taking place. There is an appetite to help. I think people are looking for ways to help. And if you have one of those ways of helping, using video, using digital donor engagement is something that you absolutely want to start thinking about right now for donors at every level, not just the annual fund. We're seeing it at the major gift level as well. Personalized outreach. Again, this is something that goes, I think, well beyond the current situation with the coronavirus, but, simply taking a video and having a gift officer record 10 different introductions, just like we have right here, decently well lit, decently well framed, not anything over the top in terms of glossiness or high production value, but simply having a development officer call out the recipient by name. Sarah and Tom Donor, we really, really appreciate the support you've given us. And we wanted to share with you this message around how we're fighting back against the coronavirus at our institution. And then the same video goes out to everybody else. We call this bookending videos. And, anywhere from 10 to 100 or 200 of those can be produced and then sent to donors, calling them out by names. We've all kind of gotten past the idea of, merge fields. That's kind of standard now, right? When you get an email, they better at least have your first name at the top of it. Well, this is the new version of that. This is the more advanced version of that. We're doing merge fields in video, and we're seeing tremendous results long before the coronavirus from donors and recipients who are receiving those videos that actually address them by first and last name. Simple trick. It takes all of about a half an hour to add a personalized greeting to a half dozen or so videos, but can mean all the difference in the world to having a donor watch that video, but then also react to it in the way that we want them to. Keeping going along the lines of collaboration, stick with your creative partners. I mean, what have you always wanted to produce? What have you always said, boy, it'd be great if we could put this together if we just had the time? Well, now you might. You might need to be a little bit creative over the next few weeks in how you capture things like B-roll. Animation's a really good tool to use right now. But even after we get out of the worst of this and we're able to start to go back to our jobs and whatnot, we probably still have time to think about this type of content. What do we want to produce? Ask your team, what have you seen? What are others in the industry doing? What are others outside of the industry doing? What are some really compelling videos that have hit home with you? Why did they hit home? And can we maybe do something like that to engage our donors? Absolutely be mindful of the tone. This has been relevant around our giving days. We have a lot of giving days. It's spring. April, May are a very busy time with giving days, March, April, May. And it's interesting because just like everything else, it kind of changes by the hour. But generally speaking, what we're looking at is, if you have a giving day in late April or May, a lot of organizations are still sticking with those for now, getting ready to possibly transfer them to the summer or the fall, because we don't know where the national mood is going to be. Right now, the only fundraising most of our client partners are comfortable with outside of, some very, specific targeted efforts, but we're talking about sort of that more mass communication fundraising, are those around coronavirus and COVID-19. But that's going to change quickly. And I think it'll change with the national mood. Once we get to a point, maybe mid-April, maybe later, maybe earlier, where we start to have a handle on this and we have a little bit more clarity on exactly what it's going to mean and things start to reopen at some point, that's when we're going to move to a conversation around recovery. And if you have a giving day in, say, mid-May, you might use that giving day to say, you were with us and supported these funds, but now we want to start building to the future. If it's higher education, we want to start strong in September. We want to launch with, we want to have this year be better than ever before, and you can help us make that happen by making a gift today. Again, depends on the national mood. If we're in that mode of recovery, getting back to normal, fixing what was wrong and being better, that might be a really compelling message. The virtual visits, very important. We want to make sure that we're thinking about this. University of St. Thomas has been leading the way in this for, I think, more than a year now, and they've seen some really good results using exactly this channel, this medium, video conferencing, for their familiar prospects and donors. It was a little bit more difficult for those who they hadn't really engaged and warmed yet, but for those who they know well, the virtual visits have actually worked quite well. Works really well to break down geographical barriers. We've got another client partner who just recently, I learned, we did the DDO training workshop for them last fall, and then one of their development officers, digital development officers, actually landed a significant gift from a donor overseas who wanted to endow a program to have students travel to that country overseas. Never met the person in real life, did everything through virtual channels like this. That's their job. They're a digital development officer, and they're landing big gifts from overseas donors using tools like this. We're going to see a lot more of this long after the coronavirus, and that's a good thing. That's a really good thing, because that allows us to be more efficient. It expands our reach. It allows us to do more. Peer-to-peer, another example of having, maybe a donor in Idaho, and there's a prospect in Arizona, and the three of you can get together very easily through a channel like this once you get the hang of something like Zoom. So, in better times, this is already happening. This supplements face-to-face. This makes us more effective fundraisers. It's all we have right now, so it's a good time to experiment and get after it.
And so really, uncertainty is often what makes us question everything. And that's really normal. And so in this time, remembering that we know what we've done in the past, that we've got a structure, and that we can continue to do it. So remember our mission, right? So each of us are out there working on, whatever it is that our organization is attempting to accomplish, whatever the issue that we're working to solve. It was important yesterday, it's important today, and it'll be important tomorrow. And so if we remember our mission and focus on that, and then focus on process. Process is really going to be helpful. And so Justin, next one here, I think talks us through sort of some of what I believe is what we need to make sure we're doing, right? So quickly, just a reminder, we all know this, we've been doing this for a while, but it's a numbers game. So we're going to reach out to people, and we're going to get a lot of no's, or we're going to get a lot of not nows or non-responses. And all of that is to be expected. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's heavy right now, but that doesn't, let's not let this get us down, because really, this is the same work we've always been doing. It's just a different format. And so that being a numbers game, let's really think a little bit about, not taking it personally, and then making sure that we're really thinking about this process, right? So block time on your calendar, again, the same way you would as if you were in the office, and do that to make your outreach. And then think about the sort of connections that you're going to make, right? So virtual, Justin's been talking about the video and the other things, but what about our email? What are the emails that you want to send just to try to reach somebody? Or how about the phone call? You know, there's a lot of email that's happening right now, and you want to maybe go back to basics and just make a phone call and check in with somebody. And then maybe it's that idea that you want to do a virtual meeting with them. And so figuring out which of the platforms you're going to use, you know, so if it's the phone call, it's the virtual meeting on Zoom or whatever the platform, you know, this is important. It's really thinking about process, right? So build your routine. And then when we're in the meetings, this is no different as well of what we've always been doing. This is about asking the open-ended questions so that we can really find out how somebody's doing, right? And so starting, of course, with checking in with them. How are they doing? How are they feeling? What's happening at this point, right? And then once you've done that listening, making sure that you're reflecting that back to them, acknowledging what you've heard, and being authentic. You know, gift officer work is now, as it's always been, this is about being yourself. And you need to be the individual that you are for your institution, because that's really what this is about. Your institution is making a difference, and you're making a difference, and you're helping these prospects and donors, constituents, make a difference and be connected.
I really love the point, Chris, about how it always goes back to the fundamentals of the work, right? You know, this is what we do. We know how to do this. Haven't been here before, but we've been working with donors for a good part of our careers, most of our careers for many of us. And that's funny, because that's kind of something that, you know, I've always used as a way to think about digital engagement. When, you know, what should we say? What should the message be? How should we go about doing this? Who should we be engaging? Take the platform, take the channels out of it, and do it at a very fundamental level the same work you've always done, that you know how to do extraordinarily well, and then use these tools to expand that, to enhance it, to amplify it, to get it out to a larger audience. I mean, that's really the big difference. I don't know if messaging or the way we talk about our mission or anything like that has changed a great deal. It's just that we have all of these tools that allow us to tell our stories. And, you know, I'm a silver linings type person. I always like to look for potential bright side in something. And, you know, again, it is a difficult situation, but I do think if we can really use this situation to think about how we can go forward and be more effective, more efficient, and more successful using multi-channel donor engagement at every level, up to and including major gifts, it's going to be something that we can take from this and see that, you know, some good has come of it. Video, that is everything. We keep coming back to this because it's so important. And what's funny is this statistic is something that for a while I was hesitant to share because it seemed a little absurd, almost impossible. Google says that 57% of everybody who watches a nonprofit's video will go on to make a gift to that nonprofit. And then maybe a month or 2, 3 ago, we were doing a workshop and somebody raised their hand, said they saw a new statistic that said it was actually 72% of everybody who watches a video will go on and give to a nonprofit. You know, that's not saying they click give now from a button on the video, but if you can actually get someone to sit through a video, it does have a transformative effect, especially if that's some good content, some real authentic content. So if we can use this as an opportunity to really think about how we want to use video to tell our stories, to engage constituents, to elevate the impact of giving, to elevate our donors, to tell their stories. We see things like major donor microsites, for example, where, again, even before the pandemic here, we had a lot of institutions and organizations that were creating microsites for a group or even a single donor. And a lot of times it'd be a stewardship piece. You'd have 2 or 3 videos from the executive director, the CEO, the president. You'd have 2 or 3 videos with people who are impacted, kids, cute pets, you know, what have you, a well, something like that happening. And the response from donors when they receive something like that, it's basically a digital version of the red carpet, right? We're always rolling out the red carpet for our biggest supporters, but we should be doing that in the digital space too. And microsites, telling the story through those microsites for individuals or small groups of donors, has had a profound effect. The donors themselves have really enjoyed it. The donors will often share it. When they share those microsites, they're exposing people in their network to your mission, and that has on more than one occasion introduced new prospects and donors to other organizations. So there are so many benefits from putting resources into this, even after we no longer have to have so many resources into it because of the current pandemic. So, you know, one of those things, again, I think a lot of nonprofits, because it is a big shift, you know, a video-driven donor engagement program certainly isn't free, although it's on a par with a lot of other tools that we're using right now. But again, that takes sort of a reallocation. And we are now sort of in a spot where we really have no choice but to start reallocating that, at least for the short term. And even if we do that for the short term, we don't need to revert back. I think we're going to see, I know we're going to see from a lot of the different client examples we've seen over the past few years, how powerful, how impactful, how successful this can be for your overall fundraising program.
And so, you know, I would say that as we think about where we are and what's gone on, this is a back to basics moment, but with a technology or a technological twist, right? So Justin is been in this digital space and is a leader here. I'm really much more traditional in the background that I have, and yet I see this as this is such an opportunity, right? So I know that often we see experimentation is really difficult, and really I think sometimes we need a nudge to get started. And so, you know, it's thinking about this, you know, what's the nudge? The nudge is really it's what we have right now. And so as we feel like this might be risky, it might be risky for us to not reach out or to do something, or rather to try this new thing. I think our feeling is really that the larger risk might be in not staying close and not being in contact with your constituents. So while this is new, continue to be yourselves, continue to be authentic, and truthful to your organization's mission. And whether it's the arts or conservation, healthcare, education, social service, or any other field, you know, this is, your organization's here for a reason, and we really are, we think this moment, for all of the challenges that it has major opportunities for us. And so thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Chris, and thank you, Justin. We have lots of questions that came in, and I don't know that we'll get to all of yours. Again, as I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, any questions that we don't answer, we will get back to you with answers to those. Justin, I think for you, several people have inquired about the tools you might use for video, like what are common platforms. A few people have mentioned ThankView. A couple of people have also mentioned, what do I use if we're in a budget freeze right now and all I have is my iPhone? Are there still things that we can do?
Well, yeah, I mean, absolutely. And we've seen so many development officers, relationship managers, and whatnot pull out their phones and post a selfie video. You know, we in most situations, major donors and prospects can't be physically on a site, at a hospital, on a campus, on a research project, on, you know, a delivery of a service somewhere. So development officers are there more often than not, and simply pulling out your phone and, you know, taking a quick video, 30 seconds right now, to show somebody the new wing on the building that's going on. The construction workers are still there working, or maybe they're taking a slight pause. But I mean, what a message of hope to send someone, a prospect, a 30, 40-second video saying, you know, hey, this is Tina. You know, we haven't talked in a couple of weeks. I know there's a lot going on, but I wanted to show you this project that you put so much of your heart into is still happening. We're on target. We're going to open this in a year, and you're going to be here and help us break ground on it. And then here it is. Here's the progress. You can see this is happening right now. That doesn't need a platform. That doesn't need any technology beyond what you probably have in your pocket right now, which is a mobile phone that can record a quick video, and you can drop that into a text message or an email. That's the type of thing that, especially now, I mean, talk a ray of hope, a reminder of, you know, what matters to your donors, a grounding moment to say, you know, we're still doing this, we're still here, and I can't wait to resume the conversation afterwards, you know, once we get past this. Or if you want to talk about it now, let's set up a video conference.
Another question, really pertaining to the subject of that content. And a few people have mentioned that they don't have access to program staff right now. One mentioned they work in healthcare. They don't have access to the caregivers or the senior leaders are focused on patients, not doing videos for us. What are ways that we can get past that or have content even when we have restrictions to those content sources?
You know, I mean, look at what ESPN is doing with replaying, or any network for that matter, replaying some of the biggest sports moments in the past couple of years. That goes back to, what do you have in your library? Like what really mattered in the past? What was some of the greatest hits from your YouTube channel? And same basic message, you can use that bookending approach where, using a webcam or a phone, you can record a quick 10-second introduction saying, hey, you know, again, we're here, we're still doing this work. I know it matters to you. I wanted to share with you something that I've really liked from the past couple of years. I think you watched it as well. But have a look, you know, this made me feel pretty good, might make you feel pretty good too, something along those lines. But, you know, even if you don't have access to be able to produce content right now, being able to sort of resurface something from a digital library from the past couple of years and talk about why you enjoy reviewing that now with a donor or a prospect can be a reason just to reach out real quickly and let them know that you're here for them.
Great, thank you, Justin. One attendee posed a comment, but I'd love, Chris, if you would be willing to comment on this. This person works with several donors who might be phone averse or really not open to working with video, but might be happy to text, use Facebook Messenger, or use LinkedIn or other ways. Even though more of a comment, would you speak to strategies for how you might use some of those tools differently to engage with donors at this time?
Yeah, it's such a good point. You know, many gift officers for some time now have actually used text messaging on a very regular basis with their prospects and donors, and some have grown to really feel like that's the channel that they're most comfortable with. And I would reinforce the fact that as you've gotten to know people, one of the things that you likely have gotten to know is their preferences and what are their communication preferences. And so if they're comfortable with text messaging, that's a great platform. Why not? Or any sort of instant messaging that you might do with them rather than a video, or rather than just the phone. You know, this is where it's so important for us to continue to really listen. And by listening, sometimes it's not just to, you know, what they're telling you in the moment, it's also what have they told you over time in terms of their preferences. So I think, you know, texting, you know, using what we have available to us, I think is a great opportunity, and I would really reinforce that should be exactly what we should do is move that direction.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. We've had a few people inquire about really some of the dialogue, and I've also heard this dialogue elsewhere, with how much should we be communicating. Really specifically, some have mentioned, and one said in her words, under the impression that we want to be sharing less content at this time, or content focused pretty solely on COVID-19. But it sounds like from this that we might want to send out other positive impact stories. Do you have any concerns about overwhelming donors with information at this time?
So I would, Justin, I'll let you take a stab at this one as well. But I would say that, you know, I think if as long as the communication is about outreach and is about checking in and it's about engagement, and we're not pushing them to, now is not the moment to send 4 different solicitation pieces, right? It's a moment to pay attention to them. But, you know, I would say that some of our great partners in arts and conservation and other areas where you might look at that and say, well, what's their connection to COVID-19? And yet they're doing wonderful things by sending out tours of a museum wing, or by taking somebody on a walk with them as they go through this conservation area and helping them just, you know, enjoy themselves for a moment and have a release from what otherwise might feel like the pressure of the moment. And so I would say, yeah, I don't think that, I think we should be cautious. I think there is probably a fine line between over communicating, but actually I think that's really, there's probably the fine line is more about over soliciting at this moment. And so it's really about communicating and staying in touch. And those that we stay in touch with are really going to take advantage of the moment to make gifts when it's appropriate for them.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I mean, you have a few situations where, depending on the nature of your work, you may be directly involved in a fundraising campaign that is targeted at stopping coronavirus right now. That is green light. Fundraise for that as much as you can. I mean, it's obvious. Your mission matters more now than ever before. For everything else, I think about, I hate to go with the anecdotal approach, but I think about, how many zoos and museums and history centers and things that, my family, we support here in the Twin Cities area. I'm worried about them. I want to see them survive. I want to see them thrive. And, maybe I'm not going to make a gift right now, but maybe I would even, especially if it was positioned in the right way. But more than anything else, I'd love to hear from them and just have a reassurance that we've got a plan for this. We're going to come through it. And, once we get into recovery mode, we're going to need your help fundraising. So absolutely, there's ways of, I think, again, sort of either directly fundraising if you have funds that are directly related to the crisis at the moment. But for everyone else, communicate. Talk about what's happening. Talk about where you're going to go, what you're going to do, how it's going to be, how you're going to recover, and make sure donors know that they're an important part of that.
Thank you, Justin and Chris. Another question I think is a really good one, it's really around giving days, which typically have a very celebratory tone. Is there any concern about the tone at this time? How would we message differently around a giving day now than we would otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, almost exactly what I think we were just saying. It depends on timing too. If you have a giving day in the next week, I think most institutions either have done one of two things: either completely pivoted towards a primarily, coronavirus related funding structure, or perhaps delayed. But again, part of it is we need to be agile. I mean, we always need to be agile. We need to be reacting to what's happening in the world around us. And now more than ever, we've got to look at the national and the international, the worldwide mood. It's a pandemic. Where are we at, generally speaking? Do we have a grasp on this? Are things starting to open up again? Is there a treatment that's available? Is a vaccine coming? I mean, there's any number of things that can completely change the conversation. I hope that by the time we get to the end of the spring, early summer, we'll start to figure out what a next step, a path forward, a recovery type approach is. Then, if you've got a giving day in late April or May, if that transition has already happened, it's a matter of, let's say it's again, higher education. School starts in September. So the real easy message is, we're going to come back stronger than ever. We fully plan on welcoming students back to campus. We're going to need your support to do that. Please give today. And I think that's a fair approach, and that's what we would recommend.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Now, here's a question. It's a real practical question, as certainly I've heard you speak, as have others, and some of the attendees have as well. We've spoken on the video really should be brief and not overly long or laborious and so forth. Do you have any advice on video calls? Should those be shorter scheduled than a typical donor meeting? Should these be like, say 30 minutes instead of an hour? Anything about the time frame of a video interaction compared to a in-person interaction?
Boy, that's a great, I think typically they are shorter. Chris, have you seen anything around this?
So far I've been working with a number of different places, and we've sort of talked about 20 to 30 minutes as a target time for a video conversation, just knowing that this feels a little different, and you're also, there's an interesting sort of different sort of intrusion into people's space in the way this feels, because everybody's doing this presumably from their homes, right? So instead of us getting together in a coffee shop or getting together someplace, even if we did get together in their home, we might well have gotten together in their, in their living room or something like that. Whereas now, who knows where somebody's setup is and how comfortable they feel doing this. So yeah, I think just knowing that this is a different time and really striving for reading the individual that you're connecting with. And as long as you start with the checking in on them, how are you doing, and then providing a little bit of an update, but before you provide that update, really listening, I think you'll get a sense of, is this going to be a 15 to 20 minutes, or is this going to be something that could go on a little bit longer, and gauge it from there.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of new things that we have to navigate. I think keeping it shorter, I would suggest that if you're asking for a half an hour of a donor's time, you book an hour of your time, because these can sometimes go long. That's a great thing if there's enough to talk about, but don't stack half an hour, back to back to back. The other thing too, on the front end, from a technology standpoint, I would be prepared to do at least base level troubleshooting, because you're going to have a lot of people who have never done this before, but are going to give it a shot. And, being able to say, okay, try this, this, and this, which, 95% of it is something along those lines. Being able to turn on a microphone on a machine, or, hitting mute, things like that. Being prepared yourself to know the technology and talk through it can make the most of that half an hour as well.
Quick follow-up, yay or nay on recording those calls? So it seems like it's a negative from both of you.
Yeah.
I don't know why you'd use it.
Sounds good. I think we can move on. I think your opinions are clear on that. I think I would share that sentiment. I always find it a little awkward when I hear it's being recorded. Maybe on a webinar like this, it's expected. There's so many questions, and again, we're not going to get to all of them, but maybe I can get to a couple more. Any advice on how to do discovery work? So I've never interacted with this person before. Might be weird to just suddenly do a video conference call. Any ways that you can reach out to them that would be meaningful for a first contact?
I think maybe even digital advertising for warming, something like that, where you're setting the table, you're getting, you're subtly delivering content in a Facebook feed or an Instagram feed, as opposed to sending an email, and, hoping that, the recipients are reacting to that. And you can see when they are. If they like it, they comment on it, they share it, that's a cue right there to reach out. So, I think a lot of the work we've done around, social media lead generation, Facebook ads, Instagram ad campaigns, to get content out, that would be one of the first places I would want to start. Take your list, your portfolio, create an audience around it, maybe do some lookalike audiences, do some prospect, generation, maybe not right now, but again, once we get to that recovery stage. So that's one of the ways I would approach it is, use the tools to subtly deliver your message, and then watch to see who's reacting with that message, and then engage them.
Excellent.
And I would say, if you don't have those, let's remember that we all gift officers started with cold calling because that was the only tool that we had. And that's how you do discovery work, right? That's a great first step. So have a phone call, or at least attempt a phone call if we have that data point on them. So I think that's a wonderful way to just try. Reach out. I think discovery work is still worth doing, although I would say anybody who I would make sure that those who have been involved with your organization, that's the group that you prioritize first. They need to be told that you're interested in them, you're caring about them, and you want to make sure that they're all right.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And perhaps the final question that we can get to, so many more, thanks again for your great participation, is really advice around virtual events or getting some of the alumni reunion classes together, talking with each other in some events. I might quick add, our own firm did a virtual happy hour on Friday. That was probably my favorite moment of these last 2 weeks. Just all of us on the screen together, chatting, no agenda, just small talk. Any advice that you have to keep that sense of community between donors rather than just institution to the donor?
We've got the virtual galas, things like that are taking place. That's a really good question. Part of why, again, with St. Thomas, that example, part of what, they were discovering is the ability to do peer-to-peer engagement. So maybe now is a good excuse to ramp that up, to make those introductions, to have conversations between donors on a video chat, especially donors that might be in different cities or even different countries or continents. We've got the tools. You can see how easy it is. We've got all three of us here all in separate locations and having a pretty great conversation. So, I think on a one-to-one level, it's a real opportunity. And again, that's one of those things that I would suggest beyond the pandemic is continuing to use these tools for that type of peer-to-peer fundraising work that we know can be so effective.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Thanks again for your participation, for joining us, for the wonderful questions. Please check back at bwf.com for upcoming webinars. I believe tomorrow is at the back of house, so we've talked about the front of house and the very important operations that keep our organizations going. I'm really excited about that conversation. And please reach out to us with other questions you have. We really want to help answer the questions as best we can. We don't know the answers. You all don't know the answers, but opportunities like this to bring our community, a community we all value so much together, to talk about these helps us, I think, really with moving progress forward. So we will get back to you with the remaining questions. And please check out our internal resources page, bwf.com/current resources. And we will be back in touch. So as I said in my other webinars, we might not all be in the same boat, but we're on different boats in the same tumultuous sea, except we've got Zoom. So be well, be safe, and keep doing what you're doing. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.